One of the most delightful things about being a parent is noticing your child noticing things for the first time. Little kids are built low to the ground, which helps with the inevitable bumps and falls. But it also means they notice every ant, rock, and flower. They see what we adults don't see. Adults tend to have places to go and important things on their minds, but for kids, the world is full of wonder and is itself the most important thing they could possibly contemplate. When our youngest son was about 2, he noticed a bee stuck inside of a tulip. He stopped me and showed me so I could help release the bee, and as we gently pulled back the petals, the bee flew off to wherever it was headed next. I had walked right by what to me looked like just any other flower, but my son had heard the frantic buzzing and noticed the flower moving. Together, we were able to help one of God's creatures on its way. Likewise, our kids have pointed out things that are special or interesting: rocks, shells, leaves, acorns, things that for me have often simply become part of the background. But for them, these new and beautiful things require someone to share in the appreciation of their beauty. It's easy enough to stop noticing when life seems more or less the same each day, or when things are working as they should. But what happens when there's a big change? In Jesus' day, the kind of skin disease these 10 men were living with would have completely cut them off from the relationships that had made their lives worthwhile. It's often translated as leprosy in this passage, but the definition of leprosy in biblical times was different from Hansen's disease, which is a bacterial infection which we now know as modern leprosy. In Jesus' time, the word was used for any skin condition: boils, eczema, psoriasis, or fungal infections, some of which were very contagious and some of which weren't. But there wasn't a way to differentiate. The only real answer to what could have been a potentially contagious disease was complete quarantine, and people were banished from their families and communities to go and live in colonies set apart, unable to make a living, unable to be part of society, unable to touch or be with loved ones. The presence of symptoms that were deemed leprosy meant complete cutoff from everything and everyone they knew and loved. The Samaritan man was doubly alienated. Not only did he suffer from a condition that meant he was cast out, but he was part of a group that was hated by Jesus' Jewish followers. The Samaritans considered themselves Jewish too, but their community had originated in fracture. 700 years before the time of Jesus, during the Assyrian conquest, their people remained in the northern kingdom. They intermarried with people from other cultures, recognized only the Torah as sacred, and held Mount Gerizim as holy rather than Mount Zion. In some ways, because they were so close to the Jews but didn't have the same beliefs, they were more reviled. These were the people the disciples wanted to call a holy rain of fire onto in chapter 9. And just after that incident, it was a good Samaritan Jesus lifted up in a parable as an example of godly living, knowing that his hearers would understand that while they understood that most Samaritans were bad, this one good Samaritan was the exception. So this particular Samaritan Jesus healed in today's gospel, along with the other 9 men whose origins we don't know, thought his life would be forever marked by his skin disease, by this one aspect of his lived experience. He thought his life had been changed forever, and that all of his days would now remain the same, marked by separation, loneliness, and pain. The healing of these men comes as a surprise to them, and Jesus' instructions are clear. Go and present yourselves to the priest so that you can be declared clean and brought back into relationship with your loved ones. Go and get on with your lives. Whoever the other 9 were, they were prepared to follow the rules. They did what Jesus told them to do. They presented themselves to the priests and went on their way. But it's the Samaritan who perhaps lacks the knowledge of what is right and proper in this context. Instead of doing what he's told, he turns back to make sure that he can thank the one who has saved him and restored him to the fullness of life. This foreigner recognizes that what has happened is truly extraordinary, and he can't help but need to share his joy with the one who made it possible. Throughout Luke, we hear stories marked by the restoration of relationship. Lost coins and sheep are found. The prodigal son returns to his father. People are healed and restored to community. This story is the bookend to the series of teachings on discipleship that began with the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, which we read a couple weeks ago. In that story, there was no good way for the rich man to restore his relationship with God or with Lazarus. But here, Jesus is able to overcome the chasm that separates the people living a quarantined life away from their communities and loved ones and from their lives. Jesus is able to restore their relationships and consequently their whole lives. The Samaritan recognizes that his life has been changed forever. Like a small child noticing something beautiful for the first time, he cannot help but be amazed. And his restoration is so incredible that he absolutely must share it with another person. In this case, with the person who made his restoration possible. It was not enough to keep this good news to himself. He needed to share his joy. In the same way, it's easy for us to forget how incredible the news is that we are loved by God, that we have been created in love and called good. For those of us who grew up hearing that message, it can be old news. It can seem like it's just another part of the landscape. But our world is mired in transactions, and the message of God's grace and love is so countercultural, so extraordinary that it's worth both sharing and being grateful for. The Samaritan man returns to give thanks to God for the gift of grace that has given him his life back. In a world and time that often feels so heavy, it's worth asking, what are you grateful for? What is worth returning to God and thanking God for? What would we be amazed by if we weren't expecting it? Especially right now, we can feel so isolated for so many different reasons, but God's restorative grace is a gift we have neither asked for or earned, and yet it is ours. Amen.